Hello, I'm your game tutor Tanochi, and today we're going to talk about free-to-play games versus paid games, as well as a couple other kinds of games that there are. So, we're going to talk about whether or not free-to-play is the future, and it's going to take over paying for games. This is Classically Trained Gaming. Alright, so there's a couple of different types of categories for gaming. There's free-to-play, there's paid games, then there's the pay-to-play or subscription-based services, and then there's a couple of different games that use a hybrid type of approach, kind of picking and choosing some of the different elements that there are. So let's go over the different categories. First up is free-to-play. So these are games that are typically attractive to a little bit of a larger audience, seeing as people don't have to pay money to them. So there's really no risk in buying the game and not liking it after a couple of hours. If you don't like it, you can just put it down and you're not down any money. Also, these games typically have a tendency to allow you to be a little more casual with games, as you can pick it up and put it down without having to justify that price tag. The problem is microtransactions. Free-to-play games are rife with microtransactions, and these can kind of be overwhelming sometimes, especially ones that are more pay-to-win type scenarios. These type of games end up costing more than paid games with a single purchase in the long run. Grinding can be pretty exhausting and take up a lot of your time. Wallet Warriors have a clear advantage and can often be in the top 100 or so of all of these types of games. Also, these games suffer sometimes from predatory business practices like loot crates and paywalls for new characters or the best characters. Now, let's move on to paid games. The good thing about a paid game is that you buy it once and then you're done. These things are typically more complete games, and they don't require the same type of grinding unless grinding is a part of the mechanics. The problem with these types of games is that there's a higher risk involved with it. You can pay $60 and then completely hate the game after, or you might not want to risk it and you won't even pick it up in the first place and lose out on such a great game. Also, they don't reach as many people as free-to-play games because of the money involved. It's sometimes harder for people to pay $60 and $50, $60, 60, and then all of a sudden it ends up becoming a couple $100 and then you don't even play the game that much. Now, we're not going to go into pay-to-play or subscription-based games too much, but the advantage of some of these games is that the updates are kind of bigger and more regular. They're usually more stable. The games tend to evolve more and usually a more immersive experience, and sometimes have some of the largest player bases around. The problem with these is that the monthly cost is very expensive and it's very hard to be casual with these types of games. Now, let's talk about these hybrid games. These things have all of the benefits of paid games, but they also have the option of paying a little bit more and getting a little bit of a better benefit. In these types of games, microtransactions are typically limited to cosmetics or specific game modes that are not part of the main game. But these can be some of the most expensive games out there, and it can be really frustrating having to buy stuff after already paying a full price game. Another little caveat is DLC. The good thing about DLC is that it's added content for a small price. It can really invigorate the player base, and it can really add on to the lifespan of a game by making an already great game and just adding a little bit of extra content. The problem with it is it does cost extra, and it can also be an excuse for not adding in that content in the first place. So, down to the question we've all been waiting for. Is free-to-play the future? I think free-to-play needs to be handled very carefully. We cannot overdo it. Microtransactions need to be limited to either cosmetics or non-functional exclusives. It's okay if you get an extra skin or a cool weapon that doesn't really give you an advantage, but we don't want pay-to-win situations. It should never, ever cost more than a fully priced game unless it's, as said before, just for cosmetic stuff. Predatory business practices like loot crates and similar to that should be banned. And I mean banned. They didn't go hard enough with loot crates. Even though they have to put the odds of you getting a certain item, it still offers a chance for you to want to just buy an extra one, just buy one more, just one more. And sometimes they often lie on the actual odds. Ultimately, for me personally, I would rather pay a full priced game than have to play any kind of game that's free, but then you have to pay afterwards. Now let's talk about a couple examples of these different types of games. Some good, some bad. The first one I'm going to talk about is Magic the Gathering Arena. So Magic the Gathering is the digital version of the game that's marketed as a free-to-play. The problem with that is that grinding is extremely tedious and time-consuming and is often limited to only so much per day. It's also tied to the amount of wins, so if you lose, you get nothing. The system also encourages people to pay a lot of money between $50 mastery passes and the $50 pre-order bundles, and this is every single set. You also have no dusting of cards that you don't want, and you also can't trade the cards with other players. All of this added together makes really it very difficult for a fast return for a player that hasn't been playing a while. If you've been out for even one set, which is 3 months, then you run the risk of not being able to play the deck that you want, and you might not have the proper amount of wild cards to get a good deck. It also has a tendency to not let you play the deck you want because of the wildcard system, and you might be stuck playing a janky version of the deck that you want until you get the amount of wins and wildcards to actually get the deck that you actually want to play. Magic Arena also uses the predatory business practices that I was talking about earlier. They often try to push things too far and then wait for player feedback to see if they've pushed it too far and then roll it back, which shows that they're not really caring about what the players want. Madden, on the other hand, is a great example of a hybrid type game. Buying a copy of Madden grants you access to its franchise mode, creative player, and online play, and really allows you to do almost everything that the game has to offer. The only part where you have to pay extra is Madden Ultimate Team, which is its own separate mode, not tied into the main portion of the game. In that mode, you can pay money to get packs for players, kind of like a card game. But the important thing is that all these items can be grinded, and almost every single one of these items are tradable. Paying extra money for Madden Ultimate Team really just accelerates the process, and Madden Ultimate Team isn't required at all for the main portion of the game. Destiny, on the other hand, is a terrible example of a hybrid style game. The problem with Destiny is that the base game was only 25% of the full game, and then they required you to pay for a season pass and then another expansion in order to get the full game that they originally were supposed to make. These season passes were a required purchase if you wanted to do matchmaking later in the game. They also ended up adding microtransactions for cosmetics and loot crates. So after you bought all of the season passes, you actually ended up paying $120, which is twice as much as any of the other paid games. Then we can go to Pokemon Sword and Shield, which is a great example of how to use DLC properly. The DLC adds 2 new regions, which are enormous, and both of them have an additional story. This DLC is not required to play the main game in any way, and it even gives you access to the Pokédex, which is not restricted to the Season Pass purchasers. This gives a lot more exciting content for Pokemon players without actually having to buy the game if you don't want to. Now, the best example of how to properly do free-to-play is Warframe. Every weapon in Warframe is available to free-to-play players. The premium currency Platinum is able to be traded, and Platinum really is used for getting access to Warframes without having to grind or doing certain cosmetics. The premium currency is Platinum, which is able to be traded amongst players. It's also only really used for unlocking warframes and weapons without having to farm, as well as a limited amount of cosmetics like color wheels. Farming blueprint components is time consuming, but not exhausting. I mean, typically speaking, it usually only takes about 5 to 10 hours to get a brand new warframe that you didn't have. Also, the game offers a lot of ways to speed up grinding, like giving bonuses to multiple people that use the same items. So, back to my question, is free to play the future? And I'm going to say a resounding no. I really think that game developers are going to continue making these AAA budget games and making fuller, more complete games without having to rely on these microtransactions. I think free to play has a space and a niche, and they're always going to be there, but they're always going to be reliant on these microtransactions that most of the time are predatory. Ultimately, I think if they're handled correctly, they can be a strong benefit to the industry. I don't think that they're going to be the mainstay. I think paid games are here to stay. All right, that's game over for today. So make sure that you like and subscribe and keep an eye out for my future videos. Have a great day.